Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 443 of the MTGGoldfish podcast. I'm Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we got this small crew here this week. Crim is in the air, I think, traveling over to Barcelona for the upcoming MagicCon. So today it's just me and the owner of MTGGoldfish, Richard. How are you today, Richard?
Doing well, Seth. Catching up on all the Comic-Con news, magic and non-magic related.
Ooh. See, I've kept up on some of the magic stuff. What's the most important or exciting piece of non-magic news from Comic-Con? Because I'm sure a lot of people care about this. I might not, but I'm sure a lot of our listeners might.
No idea. I was looking at action figures.
Okay.
So I was looking at all the new action figures that are coming out of Comic-Con and all the exclusives that they do put up online. Oh, do you know what the most important news is? We don't have it on our topic list, so I'm just going to ninja it in here. And it's Magic the Gathering CheezIts. Have you seen that? The 30th anniversary CheezIts collaboration that, I don't know if it's available still, but they put it online during Comic-Con. I can get behind this one, Seth. I can get behind this one.
I'm actually curious. So they do look like they're sold out now. Do you think we should be buying these? Like, is CheezIts finance a thing? I gotta look on eBay.
Are
people like selling these for way more? Wow, I don't know what they're selling for, but it looks like they're listed for $50.
Wait, as an investment or as a thing to support Magic the Gathering?
Well, I mean, if I was gonna eat CheezIts, can't you get them for like a couple bucks? Isn't $15 for CheezIts like? You're paying a lot for the IP, right? I assume. I don't really eat CheezIts. I don't like CheezIts especially, but... Wait, is that sacrilege? Does everyone love CheezIts?
Doesn't everyone like CheezIts? It's just like salt and cheese and oil or something. I don't know, but... So here's the gist. Anything at Comic-Con, you should buy. Because it's like super scarce. It'll sell out, and there'll be someone who like couldn't afford a ticket or couldn't get to Comic-Con or whatever that will buy it. So usually, like even the free stuff they give away at Comic-Con goes for like a very high premium. So people are crazy about their exclusive swag. So if I had the chance, I would have bought a pallet of CheezIts. And then worst case fallback is you eat CheezIts for life. You can't sell them.
Yeah,
CheezIts.
You got a lifetime supply of CheezIts with Teferi on the box. I think one of the packaging was pretty good, actually. It looks like an old like Magic card back, and it says Booster Snacks. Like a booster pack that you had to slip in the pun. I wish they'll never do this because it's WotC, but Pringles would be so funny if they did a Pringles crossover. Wizards would so win the internet and everyone would think it was hilarious, but I don't think Wizards would actually do it. I think that's a little above their ability when it comes to viral marketing. Anyway, CheezIts, Magic cards. What else do we got on our agenda for today? We're going to be jumping around a little bit, I think, today. We got a few different topics to hit up. We want to talk a bit about Commander Masters, especially the PreCons were the big thing from the past week. We'll talk about the specific cards on the Commander Clash podcast, and we're not going to go deep on the spoilers themselves, but want to talk about it a little bit from a meta perspective. We also got some spoilers from Comic-Con, I believe, Doctor Who previews, some art teasers from Mark Rosewater about upcoming products. We got a nerf on Arena, we got a Modern Pro Tour this weekend, and then answering some fish mail. So I think that's the general plan for today. Before we jump into it, though, a reminder that today's show is brought to you by Card Conduit, and Card Conduit's the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. If you ever get tired of all the hassles that go into buy listing your cards, Card Conduit lets you skip them. With their curated service, you can send in as many cards as you want with a buy list value of $1 or more and pay just a 5% service fee, or you can do a little bit of work on your end and list and sort your cards in advance and use the sorted service and pay just a 2% fee. And either way, you're going to get a detailed report with the results and a fast payment once your order is processed, and you can even get another 10% off by heading over to cardconduit.com/MTGGoldfish. Card Conduit, they are the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. So thank you to Card Conduit for supporting the show, and let's talk some Magic, and let's start with these Commander Precons, Richard. This has been the biggest topic of the week. There's been, just a huge conversation around these. So to set the stage for this, there's 4 Precons with the set. They're pretty iconic themes like Eldrazi, Enchantress, Super Friends, Slivers. So some really like all-star casual themes. They're selling for at least double normal precons. I think normal precons now are like 40, 45. The base price of these is around 80. And it seems like the more popular ones, Eldrazi and then Slivers, are selling for 120, 140, 160 on the secondary market. So I'm curious, Richard, what do you make of these precons? Like, the big criticism that I've seen from a lot of people is people feel like because the price is so much higher, the decks just aren't good enough for the price. People look at these and say, well, this is essentially a normal precon. I don't see much that separates this from the $40 precons, except you're charging me 2 or 3 times as much to get these precons. Is that fair criticism?
Yes, but I will go with the criticism that they should just be cheap. Like, even if they were like $500 and the EV was $2,000 or something, right? You got like 4 times the value. It doesn't matter. Like, precons are meant as an easy way to get into Magic the Gathering, right? They are not meant as an investment vehicle. They're not meant as a fill out your collection for cheaper value or something, right? Like, they should be as cheap as possible at a high enough power level that you can play them at the average commander pod, whatever the heck that is, right? Such that you can actually buy like a whole play set, bring them to F&M. If someone doesn't have a deck, you give it to them, they play, right? Like, if the precons are $80 a piece, are you really buying 4 precons and bringing them there to give to your friends? Like, so I think there's like a double-edged criticism here. Like, 1, there's not enough value to justify the price. But 2, like, why... Even though they said they're not premium explicitly on the weekly Magic the Gathering stream, they're a premium product, right? They're charging more. Like, why? These should be as cheap as possible to get people into Commander. So I think Wizards has gone crazy with the greed here, right? They're trying to increase the price, give us crappy mana bases, and say that they meant to do that, and then like tell us it's not premium. Like, oh, there's no MSRP, guys. It's not a premium product. Look at the prices. That's all you need to see, right? Yeah. It's a premium product.
I mean, the price does make it clear, right? If people say it's a premium product, that's basically what they're referring to, is you're charging more than you would be normally. So I think like the whole it's not a premium product thing, that's kind of silly. Even if like they don't define it as a premium product from the perspective of a player and a consumer, it obviously is because it's being sold for more. I wonder though, like, I think I kind of disagree with precons should always be as cheap as possible. I think we get so many precons these days. If this was 2013 and we got like 1 run of precons a year, 100% every time, they should be super cheap. This is for onboarding new players. But I wonder in 2023, when we get precons every set, and now with master sets, and then a random one of secret layer drops, and like there's so many precons, do you think there's room for more expensive but better precons in the mix? The good example of this would be the secret lair one, where they did that coin flip deck secret lair drop, and that was actually, I think it was $100 plus shipping, and that was actually really well received because there was like $300 value in cards. The deck looked pretty functional out of the box. So other than the shipping issues where it took forever to ship, which I don't think is really related to the quality of the deck or the price, I think that was a successful $100 precon. So do you think there's room for a $80, $100 precon that's not targeted for new players, and new players should be getting the ones that come out every set for $25 or $40 or whatever?
Yes, but how much? Like, who's gonna buy it? Like, if I sell you this precon for $300, Seth, are you gonna buy it? Like, if they're gonna make it a play, like, it's like event decks. Did anyone ever buy an event deck? Like, it's meant to be played at a competitive level, but it's still like a quarter of a tier deck. So, yeah, like the actual good decks are super expensive. And I guess you could just make a budget deck. Like, you can make a high-powered budget deck and sell it, but then it wouldn't warrant the high price tag. So I don't know. But I could see a world where you pay $300 and you actually get a very strong commander deck that's not like budget. Like, it actually includes staples. But how many people would buy that? That's usually when you're entering that territory, you are building your own decks, right? And you're making your own trade-offs. That's the other thing about precons, right? Like, because of the budgets, there are trade-offs to be made. And when you let Wizards make the precon, you let Wizards make the trade-off, right? But maybe you can make better trade-offs given your situation. Like you own existing cards that you can trade off, or you like certain cards better than other cards, so you're okay with spending less money here and spending more money there. So I don't know. But like they can also sell a modern deck. Why don't they ever do that? Where's my like $500 Omnath deck in a box or something, right? Like I don't know, right? I feel there's no real market for that. That's my guess.
Yeah, maybe that's true. Although we've never really, it's always been half measures, right? Whenever we've gotten like event decks or things like that, it's always like, well, you get one Thoughtseize, you get one Goldspan Dragon. So it's like, you can see how it's based off of like a top tier deck, but then it's missing some of the really expensive important pieces there where you really, we would always talk about like, oh, if you buy like 3 of these challenger decks and put them together, then you actually end up with a top tier deck. But like, so I think they've never really went fully for it. I will say, I think you're right that like, it's a little awkward with Commander because Commander is so much about personalization, self-expression, more so than other formats. Like, I think if you took the top tier modern deck that cost $1,500 to build and sold a $750 version of it that was literally card for card, I think there'd be a market for that of people that want to get into the format on the cheap. I don't know if that works for Commander though. Like, do I want some $2,000 deck that you built and played on Commander Clash for $1,500 or like $1,000? Probably not. I would rather spend $1,000 on Magic cards and build my own deck and have my own like self-expression. And I think Wizards, you hinted on, like, with a precon, Wizards the one that is making all the decisions. If you build your own deck, you get to make the decisions. Wizards said something interesting about that during one of their live streams where there was a conversation about why the Sliver deck in specific had such a bad mana base, just lacking any good lands. And they said something, and this is paraphrasing, but something that sounded like they have a kind of a budget for their decks where they can put so much value into them, and they choose to put that value into more first slivers and things like exciting cards that are not lands and trim back on the lands as much as possible. So those are the kind of decisions that Wizards makes. If you were building the deck, I guess you'd have a lot more flexibility of being like, well, do I really need this random $20 sliver or this, $10 Vanquisher's banner or something? Or could I spend that on a land instead? So I think that is one of the downsides of Wizards actually building the decks. Do you think that these decks are exactly the same as a $40 precon? That's the one thing I've taken issue with is I've seen some people that make it sound like these decks are bad, and I don't think they are. Like, when I look through these deck lists and compare them to like a March of the Machines precon or a Phyrexia Obi-Wan precon, I think these decks are better. If you look at the cards that are reprinted, there's some pretty good options for a precon. My bar for precons is pretty low because usually you get like hardly any good reprints in them. So even just seeing like Chain Veil and things like that are like kind of real cards, I think they're better than the typical $40 precons. I think the problem is I don't think they're enough better to justify the price increase. What do you think about that? Like, when you look at these deck lists, does this just say normal precon to you, or can you see any premium aspect to these looking at them?
So the themes are premium.
Yes.
Right? Like, if you were to build decks of these themes, like of like your own decks, they would be more expensive than like any other archetype. Like Planeswalkers, very expensive. Slivers, very expensive. Eldrazi, very expensive. Enchantments, very expensive. So the themes are expensive. So therefore, I think the cards that, the 10 new cards for each deck that go on theme with, the deck, their price is all over the place right now, right? Because they're like pre-order prices and no one knows what they are. But I think over time, they'll just be more expensive because of the nature of the decks they go into. Is this worth the $80 price tag? I don't think so, but like at the same time, I don't know what you're expecting. Were you expecting reserveless Sliver Queens in your Sliver deck? Like, I think the mana base that people are harping on is like the easy way out. Like, you could have like made a better mana base and increased the value of the decks without like, losing your, like, there's so many lands, right? There's so many commander specific lands that you can actually fix this without eating into like the slivers you're trying to hold back to reprint somewhere else. But I don't know, like, I wouldn't pay $120 for the Sliver deck. Like, would you? Like, this is kind of crazy, right? Even if you want the new cards, and the new cards are not that insane, right? Like, they're they're good, but they're good for like this one deck. So I don't know.
I would not pick up any of these personally. I don't think it's, like I said, I think they're better than the average PreCon, but not enough better to justify double or triple the price, 4 times the price in some cases, I think, for the Eldrazi deck. So I don't think they're enough better to actually justify that. I do think the mana base issue is fixable. I think there is like, so on one hand, some players would like to see like Fetchlands, Triumph, Shocklands, like that be the mana base in precons. And I don't know if that's a realistic ask for Wizards. Like, I think we're not ever going to get to that point. That would require Wizards changing their entire business model that they've used for 30 years. And I just don't think we can win that argument. On the other hand, you know what they should do is like the Battle Bond lands, which are legit good commander lands. And they're what, $5 a piece, $7 a piece, $10 a piece. Shouldn't they just reprint those in every precon like they do Command Tower? Like, couldn't they fix this by designing really good, very playable commander lands like the Battle Bond lands and just put them in every precon? Like, wouldn't even that be a big step forward in playability for these mana bases?
Yeah. They could just invent typed tricolor tap lands and that would fix everything, right? Like, or a fetch land that fetches tapped like typed cards, and then you make the tri-lands, and then your mana base is janky, but you can fix it, right? Like you have all these like fetch lands, and then you play all of the, I don't know what they're called, like the glacial fortress type lands, right? That check for another type. You can even play, what is it? The other check lands that require 2 basics. Like there are ways to construct this that your mana base is good without being like fetch shocks. And they rely on those other lands that can come into play untapped but are conditional, right? And you just got to meet those conditions on a budget. So they got to invent new lands. I will say that like it's so backwards of Wizards. So Wizards, when you have a tapped mana base, your cards effectively cost 1 more mana. And then all your cards kind of suck now because they cost 1 more mana, right? Every game in 2023 has realized like, this resource system is the bane of people's existence. Like getting mana screwed, not having the right colors. Like people just have removed mana from games, right? You just automatically generate mana, or you have a separate deck that always guarantees your mana. And then here's Wizards locking all their mana behind more money that no one wants to spend. Like they should make mana bases as free as possible and put all the value into the actual cards, right? Like 2023 Shivan Dragon should cost a lot of money, but, fetchable Tri-Land should be free. I think that would solve a lot of the problems people have with this. And then, like, if you buy this precon, what are your upgrades? Is it slivers? No, it's mana base, right? Like, go buy some shock. I'm like, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to buy this deck and then go search for lands to put. Like, no, right? I wanted to buy more slivers to put in here, but the actual upgrade is your mana base, right? So it's just weird that they're so gung ho about this. They have so many cards worth so much value that they can afford to just like drive shock lands and fetches and stuff into the ground, but they won't. They're like holding on to like that golden goose.
They really are, yeah. It's such a, in some ways, I think it's such a like 10-year ago 60 card format mindset as far as like reprint equity and how to manage their game and manage their economy. They're thinking of it like it's 2010 or something, and you need these cards to like sell booster packs to standard players when the game is just different now. You're not even really trying to sell booster packs to standard players. You're trying to sell them to everyone, to commander players primarily. So I think that Wizards does need to like shift their mindset when it comes to lands. I very much agree with you. Like, I think we're to the point where the healthiest thing for the game would be to get rid of rare duels and make them uncommon duels. Like, that would solve so many of these issues, and it would make the game so much better for so many players. And you're very right. Just like Wizard said, like, the mana base is kind of boring. So we spend our budget on cool cards that people like. That same line of thinking applies to someone who buys this deck and goes to upgrade it. No new player is going to be excited about having to spend their time and their money to, like, upgrade their Cinderglades into Stomping Grounds. Like, but that's what they need to do to make their deck work. So I think that Wizards, hopefully hopefully they find a solution to the problem, because I think that would go a super long way if they could figure out a way to solve the mana base issue, because that is legitimately one of the most disappointing parts of these decks. Especially, I know all of the mana bases look like PreCon mana bases. The Sliver one's especially painful because it's 5 color and it's a very aggro deck, and just playing a ton of tap lands and you're like, I'm trying to curve out with Sliver's deck seems very, very rough. But anyway, any other thoughts?
I'm sure Tomer can tell you that you can build a much better budget 5 color mana base than like literally, like this is a beginner player's version, right? Like I'll get every tri-land in the color that ETB's tapped and I'll like stick it in the deck.
Yep.
And you will never play on curve ever again, right? But there are ways to construct a 5C mana base on a budget that, you know, actually can play stuff on curve. So this is like egregious on multiple fronts.
Yeah, and they threw the they threw the tap Fetchlands in there too. I don't. Maybe we need like commander fetches. Like I hate printing cards specifically for commander, but the equivalent of command tower, but the fetch land would actually probably be a positive to the format. Out of all the like kind of forced commander staples, command tower is the one I forgive the most, just because of what we've been talking about, how the mana base is such a big issue, and I think giving everyone a really powerful dual land is a positive, even if I don't especially like that it's designed to specifically do that for commander. So maybe that's a avenue Wizards could explore more, is like more command towers type stuff that you can put in every deck, and eventually if you do enough of that, then everyone will have a functional mana base without spending hundreds or thousands of dollars. But
so do you mean Battle Bond fetch lands? Like it's a fetch land that ETB is untapped if you control 2 or more opponents,
or could you do
just a normal fetch?
Something like that, or like whatever, fetch a land in your commander's color identity. I don't know if there's a way to word that would work under the rules. Fetch a land that produces a color in your commander's color identity. But yeah, something that 60 card format players would not ever play, because we don't need those for 60 card formats, or even want 60 card format players to want them, because then it's going to drive prices up. So I think it needs to be somehow worded like the Battle Bond lands, where it really only works in commander.
How about a dual land that adds like tainted commander players or something, where it adds black and then also like a color of your commander's color identity. Ooh. And then it's also fetchable, and then you can make a whole cycle. So there'll be a blue one, a green one, or whatever. And then so the problem is if they just make one land, it doesn't help you. You need like at least 4 to 10 or something that are also fetchable, and then your mana base is perfect.
The other problem, you're totally right. That would be a cool cycle. My fear is though, we're designing these cards to solve the problem, and they don't show up in the next Commander Precon. They show up in the next, like, Commander Legends at Rare or at Mythic, and they're like, a new $40 staple that we can use to reprint, to print more master sets in the future. So that would be my only concern, that you really got to put them in the Precons to make it work.
They need to power creep Evolving Wilds. Like, Evolving Wilds is in every product ever, right? But it hasn't been changed since its original printing, right? It needs to be power crept. We need a new land that's good, that's printed in every product ever at like uncommon.
Yeah, I would totally agree. So hopefully we see something like that in the future, I would say. But yeah, I would say pick up singles. I would also say one last thing in these decks. The prices on the new cards seem absurdly high to me. A lot of them, if you just look at pre-sales, are like $30, $20. It is hard for me to imagine these prices actually sticking. So I honestly wouldn't even buy singles at this point. I'm definitely in the, like, give it a little while for prices to come down. Because remember, these cards also show up in collector boosters, and someone said they thought in some set boosters too, maybe. But regardless, I think the current prices of the new cards, as cool as they are, is just way, way too high. But let's move on. We got some spoilers, Richard. So you mentioned SDCC. It seems like one of Wizards' new things is they want to do spoilers at events. We know, like, next weekend, we're getting our first Eldraine spoilers from the MagicCon over in Barcelona. They're SDCC. They showed off some Doctor Who cards. This is a new Universes Beyond Commander deck set that's coming out in October. Richard, what did we see about Doctor Who? Also, actually, first, is Doctor Who something you're into? Have you ever watched that? Because I've never watched Doctor Who. Okay.
I've never heard of, like, Doctor Strange. What? No, like, I mean, okay. So actually, funny enough, my first experience of Doctor Who was actually at Comic-Con. So one year as a Rami at Comic-Con, and almost got trampled by a herd of people because there was a Doctor Who appearance on the floor, and it was like a new season of Doctor Who just kicked off or something, and they changed the Doctor or something. I have no idea anything about Doctor Who, right? But the cast was there, and it was a female lead or something, and maybe this was the first time it happened. I'm not exactly sure, but people were super interested, and it was like a horde of people jammed the whole hall up, couldn't get anywhere. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's Doctor Who. And all I know is there's something about like a booth or something and they travel somewhere, and that's all I know.
Yeah.
I know, like, you know more Lord of the Rings than I know Doctor Who, Seth. So this is my X-Men here. I'm like, is that a doctor? Is this person a doctor? Like, who, what?
Unfortunately, this is also another one of my X-Men where I've never actually watched it. From what I gather, there's doctors and they time travel, like that part. I figured that part out. And it seems like they're trying to represent that in the cards. It seems like suspend is like one of the big themes to represent time travel. What do you think of these cards, Richard? Are any of them actually good?
All right, let's see if we can figure out the story of Doctor Who through Magic cards. So there's this vehicle called Tardis. It looks like a telephone booth, so I think this is how they travel. Okay, 2 mana. It's a 2/4. Flying. When Tardis attacks, if you control a Time Lord, the next spell you cast this turn has Cascade, and you may Planeswalk. Crew 2.
So we should say Time Lord is a new creature type that is coming with the Doctor Who set. So we don't have any Time Lords outside of Changelings, I guess, are probably Time Lords by default. But we don't have any Time Lords in Magic. Wizards, also, there was some confusion over whether Time Lord was 2 creature types or 1. Wizards confirmed it's 1 creature type. So if you have a creature type Lord, it wouldn't apply to this or whatever. So do you think this card's actually good? So the thing, like, it's so hard to evaluate because
when you get Cascade, how can it be bad, right?
Well, you got to control a Time Lord. I think that's a challenge. So like,
let's presume your commander's a Time Lord. I'm going to assume. Wait, there's no commander, though. Okay. I'm going to assume the doctors, and there are going to be many of them, are legendary. Okay. And in the context in which you play this, they will probably be your commander. So your commander needs to exist on the battlefield, which it probably should. And then your next spell has Cascade after you attack with 2/4 flying. It's got to be good, right?
I think it's totally worth it. If you're playing a deck that has a bunch of Time Lords in it, then I think it's good. Obviously, if you don't have Time Lords, it doesn't do much. One thing I've learned about vehicles is flying is a really big deal. The best vehicles throughout Magic's history have flying because they often need to attack to do anything, and it's much easier to attack every turn if you have evasion. It only crews for 2, and then getting a free Cascade post-combat main phase, that seems pretty solid. So if I'm playing a Doctor Who deck or a deck that has a bunch of Time Lords, this is my Smuggler's Copter or whatever. I think you play this every time. It's even a 2/4. Like, that's pretty good.
So the format is Commander, right? This is a plain chase product. So it's not Lord of the Rings, right? It's not going into Modern or anything. It's actually just straight supplemental. So
it's basically the Warhammer decks, but for Doctor Who. It's only Commander precons, and then I think they're also selling collector booster packs with different versions of the cards in the precons. But yeah, Commander and Legacy only, essentially.
It's marked as uncommon though, so maybe it sucks. I'm not sure. Doesn't it seem way better? Is there like only 1 Time Lord in the whole set or something? Because even then, I just take a Changeling. Changelings are Time Lords, right?
As far as we know, yeah.
These are just a creature type. This is not a new type like a Planeswalker or something, right? It's actually just a 2-word creature type. So this seems good, but it's marked as uncommon. So I'm not sure.
Rarity doesn't matter much when it comes to precons, really. So I wouldn't put too much weight in that.
Normally the alternate commander's a mythic, and the good cards are rares and mythics. Like price-wise, it makes no difference, right? But they're not going to put their bomb at common in a precon, are they?
I mean, I think it's a good filler card. We actually have a Time Lord.
We have a Doctor. Yeah. Okay. See, there are multiple Doctors. We're getting somewhere. The 10th Doctor is the name of the card.
God. How many Doctors
blue,
are
red.
there?
I think they're like every season, every couple seasons, there's a new Doctor. I'm not do they die or something. I'm not sure where these Doctors come from, but there are multiple Doctors. Like this show has been going on since the 60s or something.
Yeah.
It's like James Bond, except they actually recognize the new characters as new characters, I think.
Okay, I can see that.
Okay. All the Doctor Who fans are like cringing here as we try to figure out how the universe works. So it's a 3/5 legendary creature, Time Lord Doctor. So also a doctor. Allons-y. Is this French? I'm not sure. Whenever you attack, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card. Put 3 time counters on it. If it doesn't have suspend, it gains suspend. Timey-wimey. 7 generic mana. Time travel 3 times. Activate only as a sorcery. For each suspended card you own and each permanent you control with a time counter on it, you may add or remove a time counter. Then do it 2 more times. Okay. So time travel is like you can manipulate suspend counters.
Yep.
And then this is when you attack, exile cards on top, and then you can put
you suspend something,
basically.
Spell.
Yeah.
Basically, you suspend the first non-land on the top of your deck, right? I think is how it'll actually play out.
Suspend 3. Yeah.
But then if you can activate it, you get through those time. You can play it right away, essentially. So if you have enough mana, you could attack with it and remove the 3 time counters. And for 7 mana, play Mind's Desire, essentially. Play a random card from the top of your deck. It seems fun. Like, is it... do you think this is a strong commander card? It's obviously not a 60 card format card. It's not designed to be a 60 card format card. So it does need to attack. So that's one little check on power. It's not an ETB trigger. You do have to play it and swing with it. Although red has a lot of haste, so you can get around that. I think it obviously wants a bunch of suspend cards in your deck. Like if you're just trying to use the doctor to suspend, it's pretty medium. But if you're loading up on a bunch of like old school suspend cards, it could be pretty powerful, right? Because you can remove the time counters from each suspended card you own. So if you have 5 cards suspended, this can be getting the counters off of all of them with 1 activation.
So after playing Tom Bombadil, okay, so things that are super choreographed are terrible in Commander. So in 1v1, you're like, okay, I got 2 turns before this thing comes to suspend, but I'm trying to kill you anyway, so it makes no difference to me. Whereas in Commander, if you slap a like scary suspend card into, a scary card into suspend, people see that there's 3 time counters on it, and then it also know that you're a Doctor Who deck that can manipulate time. So like, oh, if he untaps next turn, he's gonna like time travel, remove a counter. They'll like super kill you. So I think this is not good. I think it's the saga problem with Tom Bombadil. Like all your sagas pay off on turn 3, and everyone sees them coming from a mile away. So you will be definitely dead by the time they happen. So I don't like this whole mechanic. And I feel time travel is a cowardly way out here. Couldn't they like give you an extra turn for time travel or reverse a turn? Somehow unwind the game state to go back in time and undo something.
Okay.
Like manipulating suspend counters is so meh.
That is
right?
That is the easy way, right? Like I think from the tiny bit I've read about Doctor Who, like time travel is like really important to it. So I think you got to represent time travel, but maybe suspend. I mean, but suspend is kind of representing time, right? And then his ability is like traveling the timey-wimey. The timey-wimey ability actually is like manipulating time. You're traveling through time and getting that card faster. So I don't mind. Like, I don't think it's an especially powerful mechanic for the reasons you said. It's very telegraphed, but I don't really mind the design of it. I actually have a financy question for you, Richard. So it seems like suspend is going to be a big theme of these decks. We saw the Warhammer decks be super popular in just the last week. I've seen lots of slivers that weren't reprinted spiking in price, like huge amounts. Lots of Eldrazi that weren't reprinted, spiking in price, huge amounts. Is it worth going back through the suspend cards and like, do you pick up Wheel of Fate now or Soul Talisman, or like, do you pick up any of the decent suspend cards now? Or is your expectation they will be reprinted in these decks with Doctor Who flavor? And like, why would you buy Wheel of Fate? Because there's obviously going to be a Doctor Who version that's going to get reprinted in these decks.
This is rough. Like, are there reserve list cards? So the reserve list,
no
makes
reserve
it
list,
easy, right?
It's
but,
all modern stuff. Yeah.
With the sliver deck, you would expect them to reprint a bunch of slivers, and then they didn't. So you're like, oh, I don't want to buy these because they're going to reprint them, and then they didn't. And then now you have to pay like the inflated price, right? But then on the flip side, if you buy a card and they reprint it, you're like super sad. So it's a bit of a risk. So I would personally only do it if I actually cared about the deck. It's like CheezIts, right? You do a little finance gamble, and then if it doesn't pay off, you got to just eat CheezIts. Are you okay with eating CheezIts the rest of your life? Here, are you okay with playing with your Doctor Who cards and suspend cards? If you're like, I can't play this deck, it's just sitting in a box with my failed spec, then like I don't know about that, right? But the fallback for me for a failed spec is you just play the cards, and then maybe eventually it becomes expensive again. But I don't know, it's a bit risky.
It is definitely a bit risky. The one thing I will say, I'm just like kind of browsing through suspend cards and the ones that you might actually want in Commander, like Wheel of Fate's a wheel, Inevitable Betrayal is a bribery with suspend, like the good ones. And these cards are like, the most expensive one I've seen so far is $2. And a lot of them are like literal bulk rare prices.
Oh, okay. That's pretty cheap,
I might
then.
snag like a playset of like Inevitable Betrayal, which I would put in every suspend Commander deck. Like Bribery's awesome. I might snag a playset, just like, what's the worst case? Worst case, I got a bulk rare for 50 cents. Best case, I guess, is everyone goes crazy for these Doctor Who's decks and I get mine early and I'm not paying $5 a copy for them. So just because they're so dirt cheap, I might actually buy some of them.
You become a meme with your Crucible of the Spirit Dragons.
That's the best case. I got so much meme value out of those Crucibles. They paid for themselves in meme value. I think we have a couple more cards.
Speaking of being super telegraphed, here's a saga, The Parting of the Ways. 4 red. It's a saga. So the first chapter is exile the top 5 cards of your library. For each non-land card exiled this way, put a number of time counters on that card equal to its mana value. If it doesn't have suspend, it gains suspend. 2, time travel, then time travel again. And then 3, for each opponent, destroy up to 1 target artifact that player controls. And this is a normal saga, no read ahead or anything like that.
I like that you end with blow up an artifact. For all the epic decks, shatter. It was a 1 with a shatter.
There's probably some lore reason for this, right?
That's probably true. So this card, so it's not good in general. Like there's no way you're playing this in a non-suspend deck. I don't even know. Would you play this in Tom? Like, is this even good enough for a saga deck, or is it just too slow? The problem is if you exile powerful things, they're probably expensive and have many time counters, and it's going to take a very long time for you to get them.
No, you want to exile suspend cards, right? How does this work? If there's an actual suspend card on top, its mana value is 0. So you exile it and put 0 time counters on it, so you cast it immediately. And then if it doesn't have suspend, it gains suspend, so that doesn't apply. So you just cast suspend cards off the top when you do this?
I need to look up the actual text on suspend. Is it when the last time counter is removed? I almost think that you cast it when the last counter is removed rather than when it has no counters. Second ability triggers, remove a time counter. Third, cause you to cast it when the last time counter is removed. Yeah, so if you exile a 0 mana spell, I don't think you could ever cast it because you would never have a time counter to remove.
So you lose all your suspend? Wait, that doesn't even make any sense. So you play this and you just exile your suspend cards off the top of your library for no gain?
Well, I mean, the most iconic suspend cards are the one with no mana value, but many suspend cards actually have a mana value. Like most of the mechanic does have a mana value.
You're right. Usually they're like some uncastable amount,
and then you can suspend on the cheap. Yeah, it's like a 9-drop, but then you suspend for 2 and
but that
wait
still
a while.
makes it worse, right? Because now you just suspended your thing for 10 mana rather than suspending it for suspend cost.
Yeah, so I actually think it doesn't work that well with literal suspend cards. It's probably at its best if you're playing it with just... I actually don't even know what you... Like, if you get an Emrakul or something, it's going to have 15 counters on it. How do you ever get 15 time counters off of Emrakul before the game ends?
This card is essentially suspend a bunch of stuff and then remove the mana value by 2, right? Because you get to double time travel and then it's the miser artifact destruction at the end. Like, I don't know. But...
No, this card is actually just you lose the game. This is you play this and suspend some big bombs with 8 counters or something, and everyone's like, oh, well, we better kill them in the next 8 turns. Like, I don't know how this ends without you dying. So, I mean, maybe it's fine in a time counter deck. Like, if you're playing the flavor, like, I don't know what Bad Wolf means. Like, I'm sure there's flavor reasons to play this, but I can't see playing it outside of a Doctor Who deck.
Okay. Exterminate with an exclamation mark. 2 and a black. So 3 mana sorcery. It has replicate, tap an untapped Dalek you control. So for each Dalek you tap as you cast this, you can copy this spell essentially. And then destroy target creature. Its controller loses 3 life.
I don't know what a Dalek is. I'm actually pulling. Apparently, an alien extraterrestrial race of some kind.
So it's a picture of like an R2D2 looking thing, like zapping the skeleton person. So as removal, this kind of sucks, but as a finisher, this could be pretty good if you have a lot of Daleks, right? Actually, no, it doesn't work. Your opponent has to have lots of creatures too.
I guess that's true. It would be hard to actually kill someone unless they had a really big board. So we haven't seen any Daleks yet. Although, like, isn't this the best tribal card? Wouldn't this be a staple in, like, a changeling deck like Tomer plays? I feel like this would be absurd with changelings. If, like, most of your creatures are changelings, how many copies do you need for it to be worth it? 2? 3? Then this is, like, probably pretty playable as a...
I mean, you essentially wrath a person's board, like, deal a ton of damage to them, so... Yeah, I think tribal could use this. And depending on how easy it is to make Daleks, are they like 2/2s and 1/1s, or are they like 8/8s? You know, are they Eldrazi or something, right? Like, can you actually get a lot of these on the battlefield?
So we have seen a Dalek token, actually. It's a 3/3 with Menace. So
that's kind of big.
That's probably going to be a little expensive to make. Yeah, that's kind of big. So we'll see. We'll see how easy they are to make. But changelings for sure worth keeping in mind, I think.
Then speaking of tokens, we got an alien insect token, which is a 1/1 flyer. We got a food token. We got a clue token, and then we got the Dalek token that Seth said. And then also there's a bunch of planes, which we won't talk about, but there's 4 new planes they revealed. So those are all the Doctor Who cards.
Apparently
Are you excited to watch Doctor Who now?
I actually posted a thing on Twitter. I think there's like an overwhelming amount of this show. There's just like so many seasons, and I mean, we saw the 10th Doctor or something. Like, there's just so much of the show. I wouldn't know where to start. But I got some really good recommendations from Magic Twitter about, like, if I just want to watch one season, or even like just some episodes, the best episodes, to just get an idea what the show's about. So I have a list of episodes I'm gonna watch that I've gotten from various people in the Magic community. So
I don't think share it on the podcast, Seth.
Maybe how are people gonna know
what's
all right, watch? I can look it up. I can look it up and see. There was some really good recommendations.
It's actually episode. It's not like a season. They're not like watch season 10.
So season wise, it's pretty simple. So apparently there were 2 runs of the show, and almost everyone who's a Doctor Who fan says the first one is like for hardcore fans only. If you go back and watch the like 60, 70 version, there's like a little bit of nostalgia if you're like a hardcore Doctor Who fan. But if you're a new person to Doctor Who, don't watch the original. Watch the reboot that started in like 2005 or something. And the first season or the second season of the reboot is the one that pretty much everyone recommended. There was also like Gavin Verhey, apparently really likes this show. He recommended 5 episodes that got like a ton of upvotes and likes. Blink, the 11th Hour, Vincent and the Doctor, Heaven Sent, and The Girl in the Fireplace. If you want to get an intro to the show, those are the 5 like really good episodes that a lot of people seem to agree are some of the best episodes to watch if you just want to get a sense of what Doctor Who's about. So I think I'm going to try it. I'm going to try it enough just to see what it's like. I mean, I sat through Lord of the Rings. I can sit through some Doctor Who. It can't be that bad, right?
I don't know. Lord of the Rings actually won Academy Awards. I don't know if Doctor Who is like legit good or like a cult favorite. Like, it is very popular, but I don't know, like, would a normal person like Doctor Who? Like, I'm not sure. It has to be, right? It's gone on for like literally decades on TV, right?
How do you think its popularity compares to Warhammer? Because those decks were super popular. Like, that was a really big thing Magic-wise. Should we expect something similar? Like, is this going to be a pretty big release, or is this a Fortnite or a Walking Dead that's just kind of like, whatever, no one actually cares?
So these are new cards, right? The reason no one cared about Fortnite is because it's like just reprints. And then people were sketched out by new cards for Walking Dead and then the release model, things like that. I think this will probably be popular. Although the Steam kind of sucks. I don't know. Like the time travel. It's a very weak mechanic.
It is. But maybe it'll make sense
for Commander.
When it all comes together, maybe it'll look better a little bit when we see more cards.
I don't know. Like when I was at Comic-Con, there were a lot of Doctor Who fans, but I don't know what this tells me, right? There are a lot of weird niche fans at Comic-Con, but I was like, what the heck is this, right? I'm like, why are there so many people here? But that was also a long time ago when I was at Comic-Con. So I don't know if this is one of those like past its prime IPs that Magic has picked up, or if it's actually like, no, people are actually still like it. Like, like Lord of the Rings, the movies. Okay, the books are like ancient, right? But the movies are also like 20, 25 years old, right? But people still love it. It's not actually past its prime, even though it's old. Maybe this is the same, right? Maybe it's old, like 60s version or whatever, but people still love it. So it's fine.
I mean, I think at its worst, it's a cult classic. Like, it's something I've definitely heard about before, even though I've never actually taken the time to watch it. So I think it's something that does have a pretty big fan base. So how it compares to Warhammer, I have no idea, but there's certainly a big number of Doctor Who fans out there. So I'm kind of excited for it, even though Doctor Who, I haven't watched it yet, but I'll add it to my list.
Why do you compare it to Warhammer, not Lord of the Rings? Well, Lord of the Rings is our most recent Universes Beyond, right?
But magic-wise, they're most similar, because they're both just a set of commander decks. Okay. Lord of the Rings, you got the full set and draft and modern. This is just almost release-wise, it's very similar to Warhammer, where it's like 4 commander decks built around this theme. So magic-wise, I think it's most similar. But anyway, let's move on. We got a couple of other topics. One is, last week on our cast, we talked a little bit about how we would rebalance some arena cards. Well, it seems like Watsy might listen to the podcast, because the very next morning we woke up and Crucius, everyone's favorite alchemy pirate, ended up getting a little bit rebalanced. So Wizard's choice, Richard, was to do what? How did they rebalance the card?
So it just became a 3-1 instead of a 3-3. The text looks exactly the same. Is this relevant? Like, were you using Couscous as a blocker? Like, I feel this missed the mark. I'm not sure. Like, yes, it is a nerf, but was this the thing?
So, okay, on one hand, my first impression was it wasn't enough of a nerf. And I still see a lot of people playing this card in Historic. It's still, I don't think many people have dropped it from their Rakdos decks. They still just snam it. On the other hand, it is more of a nerf than I thought at first, just because everyone is playing Orcish Bowmasters. And Bowmasters ends up being like a really nice answer to this. So I think that maybe that was Watsy's thinking, is like, if 40% of people in Historic are playing Bowmasters, or whatever the actual number is, like, maybe this is enough to just let Bowmasters snipe it. So it has felt less oppressive. Maybe they actually nailed it with the nerf, as weird as that sounds, because people are still playing it, and I haven't heard people complaining about, oh no, they ruined my Rakdos deck, my wild cards. So it's still good enough to play, but it has felt a little bit less oppressive than it was before. It actually feels like, okay, I have some chance of getting this off the battlefield before it just snowballs me out of the game. So I've come around on this actually maybe being the correct way to fix Crucius, now that I've had a week to actually play with it and against it.
Do people play Stomp or things? Like, is there other removal that would remove it at 1 toughness rather than 3? Because it's really, the only difference is like, you have Bowmasters in hand, now you're safe. If you don't, you're still dead. So it helps exactly the Bowmasters player.
So there's a couple of other ones, like mono red decks and best to 1 play end the festivities that deals 1 damage to everything. Frostbite shows up that deals 2 damage to things. Cut down is kind of fringe-ish, but it does occasionally show up. So there are some other answers where one toughness really matters. I will say the not being able to attack thing is not a big deal. Like, most people that I saw play with Crucius just let it sit out there and like generate its treasures and card draw stuff. Like, no one's trying to beat you down with this card, but it is worse at blocking, which I think is the other upside. Like, before, this would stonewall a lot of 2-drops against aggro. Now you actually have to choose, like, if I'm getting pressured, do I trade off my Crucius since it has 1 toughness, or do I take some more damage to leave it sitting around? So I actually think it's actually ended up being like a surprisingly good surprisingly good rebalance in practice. All right, one other topic. So I don't think we actually have time to go through all this. Mark Rosewater did a SDCC panel, and he showed off some artwork for for the next 8 products, apparently. We were going to try to go over it, but it seems like it would be really time consuming, but it does exist. I'll link it in the description to the video if you want to check it out and make guesses as to where we might be going next. They're literally just one image of each set. There's more important news though, which is this weekend we got a Pro Tour. We have a Modern Pro Tour for the first time in a while. This is going on at the MagicCon over in Barcelona. So Richard, what are you expecting? Have you been playing any Modern lately? What should we be keeping an eye on during this Pro Tour that's going to start pretty early in the US, I think, because of the time difference?
The question is, are you a One Ring hater or are you a One Ring believer? Right? Do you just play the One Ring or do you play cards to counter the One Ring? I think that's the question, right? Like nothing else has really changed other than the introduction of the One Ring and I guess Bowmasters.
Yep.
But we've been seeing the One Ring pop up on challenges and other tournaments, but here's the Pro Tour, right? Is the One Ring actually as good? The other fear is it's actually way better than anyone has ever thought. Like, it hasn't been optimized yet. Wait till we optimize the One Ring, and it actually just like destroys. But it's a trade off in that if it is a good card, do the pros say I'm actually just gonna make it better, or do the pros say no? Here's my secret tech to counter it. I tried playing the tech to counter it, like Questing Beast. It was not good. Like, it actually counters the One Ring, but every time there is no One Ring and you have a Questing Beast, you're like, wow, you actually played real cards on turn 4. I'm going to die. So I think the answer is going to be something like Grixis Death Shadow or something. It's like your answer is a counter spell, but that counter spell works against everyone. And it's only slightly worse than before. But I think that's what I'm looking for. Like, Gandalf aggro too, in case the meme becomes true. What if there's like a Frodo food deck or something, Seth? You never know. Something could pop out, right?
Yeah. I mean, the last Modern Challenge was won by Lannis combo of all things, going off with some Delighted Halflings and Samwise Gamgees and Academy Manufacturers. So I will say I'm way more excited about this Pro Tour than I expected to be. I'm always excited for Modern Pro Tours. They're my favorite, and we haven't had one in a long time, so I was already hyped. The thing that has made me more exciting is we've actually seen the Lord of the Rings that have a big impact on the meta. We're talking about the One Rings. We're talking about Orcish Bowmasters, Delighted Halflings around, Samwise is around. So it actually feels like, even though this isn't nearly a Modern Horizons level impact as far as having a huge impact throughout the whole format, there's not nearly as much depth in the Lord of the Rings set as there is in a Modern Horizons set. It is certainly shaken up the top of the meta, and I'm going to be keeping an eye on those new Lord of the Rings cards as well. Like, we have a BNR a week after this Pro Tour, and I think this Pro Tour is going to go a long way towards generating data as far as, like, is the One Ring actually a problem in Modern? Like, do we actually have to think about taking action on this card, even though it's only been out a couple months? Bowmasters is kind of floating under the radar as far as, because the One Ring is kind of soaking up all the juice in the room, but I think that's another card to keep an eye on. Like, how strong is this card really? And we're not going to be seeing random Moto challenges or league data. We're going to be seeing the best players in the world doing the most broken things possible with these cards or fighting against these cards. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see. I think we'll have a much cleaner picture of how strong the One Ring and also Bowmasters really is after this event. Do we see the pros fighting it? Do we see the pros using it? Are there brews that we haven't even seen built around these cards that could come out? It seems like that's possible, that we actually see something brand new built around these cards, or something very fringe that's like, 5-Wood League a couple weeks ago show up and actually be a really legitimate threat. So it's going to be very exciting to see how things shake out at this event. I'm expecting a lot of fast combo versus One Ring.
The BNR is a week after the Pro Tour?
Yes, Pro Tour next weekend, and then the following Monday, August 7th, is our summer ban announcement.
You've just deflated all my enjoyment out of this event, Seth. Whatever happens at this Pro Tour is meaningless because it's going to be washed away with the banning right after. Right? Like, why don't they do it a week before the Pro Tour? Like, the Pro Tour kind of sets the meta going forward, And then great for a week, and it's just gonna get shook it up immediately with the banning. And then now we're all confused. And why did I just watch like 30 hours of Magic? That's weird timing, no?
It's always weird timing. I'm definitely in the camp that I would rather see changes first and then watch the new meta at the Pro Tour.
Yeah.
Wizard sees it the opposite way. They've talked about they feel like players don't like changes. Like people playing the actual event don't like changes because they've already done their testing or whatever, and they don't want to shake up at the last minute. Doesn't matter to me. I'd rather do what's most interesting for me sitting at home watching the event on TV, which would be like
literally 1,000 players playing in the Pro Tour or millions of people. Like, who should I favor here, right? Like, that's weird.
I mean, I will say, though, there's no guarantee of bannings. It is possible that we have this Pro Tour, we have the event, everything goes fine, no changes in Modern. There's no guarantee that we'll get Modern bannings on the 7th, but that is our last big ban window of the year. So if we are going to get changes, that's when it's going to be. So that'll be going on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It'll be on the WotC Twitch. It'll be covered and all that. So I'm excited to see what Modern looks like on the biggest
Give me your
stage.
prediction, Seth. How many One Rings are we seeing? Is it gonna be the greatest Magic card of all time, or is it gonna be a flop?
I'm going to say we have half of the top 8 One Ring decks. Let's go with 4
I think it's going to
decks.
dominate. I think everyone's going to conclude that it's better to play it and the hate. Like you draw your One Ring and hate your opponent's One Ring out rather than like go all aggro. Because I don't know. I think if combo was the thing, we would have seen it on Moto already. But they have not been too successful.
So if you look at the top of the meta, the 2 most popular decks right now that are a few percentage points away from the rest is Rakdos, primarily Scam, and then 4 or 5 color Omnath One Ring piles. To me, Scam doesn't really feel like the kind of deck that most pros are going to choose. It's like very high variance jank 'em out. So I'd be surprised if we saw that. On the other hand, an Omnath pile with all the best cards in the format and like Teferis and Wrens and Omnaths and One Ring, that seems like the kind of thing that pros will talk themselves into like, I can use my play skill to like outplay my opponent. So I'm expecting we're going to see a ton of the Omnath One Ring decks at this event. That would be my guess.
Scam is just Jund, Seth. It's not a trick deck. You're just playing the mid-range game, but you could just animate your Greaves. I actually feel you might see some combos, but then the combo decks will run One Ring.
Oh, that, yeah.
They're like, oh, you're going to try to, we're just going to slow it down. We're just going to grind you out with some One Rings.
I'm actually very curious to see if we see One Ring decks like that, because it seems like the default has just been, throw it in with Omnath and it's busted. But we've also seen like Twiddle Storm. We've also seen some extra turn decks, like these more fringe One Ring decks that I could see this being a breakable format where there's some pro team or pro player that like figured out that Twiddle Storm is actually just unbeatable with the One Ring, or some Paradox Engine deck is just unbeatable with the One Ring in existence. And that ends up like stealing Dicetron or something with the One Ring that just steals the entire event. So I'm actually excited to see like what creative things we see with the One Ring outside of just the Omnath piles. But anyway, that's coming up this weekend. I think that's our last topic, but we got a couple minutes. So Richard, how about a fish mail or two?
All right. If you have any questions, send them to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail, and we'll get to your questions on air. Okay, here's a timely question from Solid Gold Toilet. With all the great reprints in Commander Masters, when will prices hit rock bottom before rebounding? Pre-order, 2 weeks, 1 month, or longer?
Ooh, so I'm definitely
when should I pick up Commander Masters?
I'm definitely so prices are already down quite a bit on a lot of the best cards. I think that prices will likely go down further once the set's released. I would be thinking waiting at least a month. Would be my guess. We haven't seen any signs of like the set's really expensive, but we haven't seen signs of it selling out. Remember some past Modern Masters where it's like you literally can't buy a box if you want to because they're just all gone. We haven't seen anything like that going on with this set. So I think the supply should be reasonably high. So my expectation is price is going to continue to drop for at least another month, and then they probably stay down for a few months, and then they'll start to rebound maybe over the winter. So I'd be looking at like this fall, we're going to be getting new standard sets, the Doctor Who deck, sometime September, October. Like, I bet that'll be the floor when everyone's focused on, what am I doing in post-rotation standard? Then you can sneak in and maybe snag these Commander reprints on the cheap, hopefully.
And does that apply to the new cards from the pre-cons as well? Or is this strictly the main set reprints?
The new cards from the pre-cons, I still think, I mentioned this earlier, I think they are massively overpriced. Like, there's no way they can be worth $30. So I think they apply even more to the new cards from the pre-cons than the reprints. I think, if anything, the reprints, they've already dropped quite a bit. So I think they'll go down a bit more, but I'm not expecting them to like cut in half again at this point because the reprinted price is already down so much. The new cards from the pre-cons, though, I expect those to end up a few bucks in most cases. Like, there's no way those, like, some random sliver is a $30 card. That's just not, that's not possible, I don't think.
Slivers, Seth. Anything is possible. They're the most popular tribe in all of Magic the Gathering.
They are popular. That is true.
We need to do a poll. When's the last time we did a poll on this? Is it Slivers still? Maybe it's Angels.
I bet it's Angels or Dragons.
Maybe
but
it's
Slivers,
Squirrels.
I think. Ooh, Squirrels is like the hipster choice, but people do like squirrels.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should do a poll on that sometime. That'd be interesting.
All right. So if you have further questions, you can send them to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail, and we'll get to your questions on air.
And I believe that brings us to the end of episode 443 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. So, Richard, thanks for hanging out. Thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And we'll be back next week to talk about the Pro Tour, MagicCon Barcelona, maybe some Eldraine spoilers, and whatever else goes on in the world of Magic. So until then, have an amazing week, everyone. And this is a crew signing out.